To be back and on the wall and on things as well. Want to do a particular live where we have an opportunity just to catch up over the last several weeks in terms of some articles, some developments that we've missed, and put that out as well for you afterwards in the community post. So we're going to be covering 50 kind of articles, and hopefully you'll be able to sort of like follow that up a little bit later as well. Hoping that you guys have had a reasonable sort of break and holiday, back to the normal grind as well. My kind of time was a little bit more extended than perhaps I'd planned, but it was good to catch up with friends and family as well. But now is also a really good time for us as well to be catching up. And so going to be sort of like just reading out and then maybe a little bit of commentary as well as we cover it, sort of like these headlines that were really important that I was itching to sort of like come and have a little chat about, maybe do a few posts as well, but just wanting to devote myself fully to what else I was doing. So here we go, starting off with the first sort of like headline of the day that we're going to be looking at. Bill Gates unveils experimental mRNA based antibiotics. We're seeing him getting his hands into many sort of like products. You might want to be sort of like having a look at those as well. If you've been sent them through Christmas or stockings or whatever, you might want to read the labels and make sure that you're covered on that particular basis. He's been known to be putting mRNA also in dental floss, in hand lotions and creams, also sort of like contaminating the water and the food supply, as well as obviously the vaccines that he's well known for meddling in India. 47 Indians, children mainly, being injured and crippled and maimed. Going to be looking at some articles. He will be coming up in the course of our live as well, guys. We're going to be looking at something that's really interesting, and it's pertaining to Greenland. We've been speaking on our channel for literally, the last 4 or 5 months since we've been back, around the importance of this sort of like formation of Greenland being a part of kind of like, Canada and the 51st state, and, Trump eyeing that up. So some really interesting articles, bearing in mind what we've been speaking about, the Club of Rome and them, and having the 10 kingdoms as well. And number one, the first king, interesting that sort of like terms been floating around as well. Interestingly, the first king is, the US and Canada and Greenland as well. So interesting, we're going to be looking at some of those things as well. So Bill Gates, here you go, as expected, get involved in every area of pharmaceutical kind of like, products. Also, another article coming out here, interesting list. I don't believe this at all. Google suddenly supports free speech as UK government demands extreme censorship online. This is all relating to the online safety bill pertaining to Ofcom and the demand to sort of like, have certain platforms abide by this. We're going to be also looking at other nations that are also imposing, I think it's Ireland, that are imposing sort of like bans and digital IDs that are required, age verification that they're calling it, all under the pretense of safety. Yet these children are surrendering their data, their information, their dates of birth, their addresses, and so much more under the pretense this is all for safety, without the parents knowing where that information is going. They don't have any say in it or any access to some of these things, as well as a means literally to justify the rest of the populace, I suppose, having these IDs, having to prove your age, etc. as well. And we're seeing people coming out and launching their own sort of like VPNs, their own backdoor entrances to keep that, sort of like space really clear. But here we go, Google suddenly supports free speech. I don't believe that at all when it comes to the searches that I end up doing, and how also Google Google has monopolized so very much of, you know, the sort of like industry when it comes to the flow of information, what's disinformation, as well as all of the sort of like evil connections as well with its logos and identity and who's really funding it and supporting it as well. But here we go as well. Various other search engines we're going to cover in a little bit of detail as well. X being under threat as well with Musk. You know, he's literally controlled opposition being sent out and about so that you get politicians huffing and puffing saying, no, we need to be shutting down YouTube. We need to be dealing with these guidelines and how sort of like, you know, awful it is, this sort of like information war that they're having and how they're having to fight the conspiracy theorists and all of these new laws or ways of doing that, of controlling all of the people and the populace as well. And the censorship is ridiculous when it comes to being over here in the UK, not being able to pray in certain areas, not being able to preach, not being able to speak the holy word of God, having that edited, being punished in the European Parliament for posting a particular quote. And yet the sort of red carpet seems to be given and laid down for so many other particular faiths, does it not? And so just a real imbalance there. Google apparently supporting free speech, all being set up as well here. Another article, Harvard professor says, look, Facebook was a Pentagon psyop. Mark Zuckerberg was the front man, just looking at his sort of like background, but also just sort of like how, you know, intrusive Facebook can be, how mean, how it's been a platform for bullying, how there's been, you know, sort of like an intrusion to privacy and everything of the sort. We only have to remember, do we not, when we go back in sort of like the archives and see Mark Zuckerberg at these sort of like tribunals being asked, where was it that you stayed this morning and what did you have to eat and where did you go and who did you meet with? And he was really reluctant and reticent to give up this information. And this is what the individual, the congressperson was trying to say, look, this is what it's like. You end up knowing absolutely everything about that. You data collect, you steal that information, and then you sort of like manipulate and coerce accordingly. So really interesting as well that these things, and very much like these tech giants that we've been speaking out about when it comes to especially Mark Zuckerberg as well, but also the Jeff Bezos with Amazon, with him doing the space thing with the cloning, with other sort of like pedo rings that he's also been known to be a very much a part of. He's also co-chair with Bill Gates when it comes to Synchron and the brain-computer interface and the injectables, when it comes to the sort of like, sort of like connecting everybody to the Internet of Things, etc. The sort of alternative to Elon Musk, another sort of like tech, guru being unleashed as well as expected. So really interesting to keep an eye on these guys, the Peter Thiels. Interesting also to keep an eye also on Sam Altman. So these tech giants all sort of like being thrown in and around the mix. Zuckerberg most recently being known for actually sort of like preparing his doomsday bunker and injecting huge amounts of money into that. In another article, guys, here, Pizzagate investigators unearth Erica Kirk video proving she traffics children for VIPs. Been looking at some of these articles very sort of like subtly, haven't really dug majorly into this issue, but very much sort of connections to Mossad, an inside job, and her actually trafficking children, etc., with sort of like tattoos and various other sort of like cult logos that she also wears and has. We only have to go back to that photograph, was it not, when she was holding Charlie's hand, and there she had a sort of Freemasonry ring, as pure as day, as well as other sort of like hands in the air, sort of like gestures that are very dubious. It does sort of like ask some really interesting questions. But now we're also seeing, are we not, through the Epstein files, through the Pizzagates, through various other sort of like whistleblowers and insiders coming out, these are all the sort of like diversions and the countermeasures that the beast system seems to want to deploy so as to sort of like throw us off the scent as they take away all of our freedoms and all our rights, and the walls come closing in as if you're on some sort of like Death Star, which pretty much this earth now should be called, do you know what I mean? But also in other news. So we're coming back to Bill Gates, do we not? Bill Gates, I'm tracking and making a list of everyone who calls me a paedophile on social media. This isn't the first time Bill Gates has threatened to compile lists on those that oppose him or make videos about him or whatever. Here he is again. This is what you call the perfect element of denial, aka deflection, aka I'm not going to own it, I'm just going to push it back onto everybody else and use the same sort of like methods that are being at the moment being used against me. Going to be looking in a moment also arrest warrants that apparently are out and about from Holland for him and Albert Bourla as well. But interestingly, you can't sort of like, you know, capture this guy, you can't ground him when it comes to his planes and his private planes and wherever he is. But you can do that with other presidents, so I hear in the news, but we're not going to be covering that. So there you go. Bill Gates saying I'm tracking and making a list of everyone who calls me a paedophile on social media, no doubt, so that he can hand that over to Peter Thiel, and then they can use all of the sort of like Gotham and the other sort of like technology against you. Awesome. In other news, guys, here we go. There's going to be about 50 of these. I'm not sure what we want right now, but here we go. Fauci says conspiracy theorists must be silenced before elite find themselves hanging from lampposts. I'm not really sure what that's all really about. You know, come on, look, Fauci says conspiracy theorists must be silenced before the elite find themselves hanging from the lampposts, as if there's going to be this massive insurrection. Do you know what I mean? That's going to be really interesting, as if they're going to be so noble and honourable as to fall upon their sword, you know, and sort of like, you know, have this deathbed confession sort of like moment. No, and do us all a favour by ridding themselves of, you know, no, we're not that fortunate. So I'm not entirely sure what that is, but it does go to show that many of these sort of like, you know, important figures, as such as they like to be known to themselves, are saying how much the conspiracy theorists about the information war, about the disinformation around the sort of like pandemic and other things that also end up happening, that end up waking people up. And after the facts, or once you've sort of like, you know, had a little bit of a review and a refresh, you know, things start to come out in the open, things start to get disclosed and unearthed, and a lot of their sort of like crimes that they're wanting to hide when it comes to vaccine deaths and injuries and other sort of like illnesses. Reading in another news as well, we haven't covered it today, but around some of the dangers around the phones and the 5Gs and the 4Gs and the microwaving and the radiation and everything else that's being weaponized against us in this particular kind of a way. And so the information war and the disinformation, and you know, the Bible was right when it wrote that, you know, those that were called evil good and, you know, good evil, seeing how much they want to be banning it, how much they want to be rewriting it, rewording it, rephrasing it, amalgamating it with other sort of like aspects. So just interesting, just around the whole conspiracy theorists. And in a sense, that sort of label is just an insult anyway. Do you know what I mean? But moving on. Here we go. This is what was astonishing, guys. Listen, 15-minute city nightmare unleashed in Glasgow as it joins worldwide 2026 open air prison rollouts. This is what we've been saying for some time, guys. It's my personal suspicion that they're going to make the environment and agriculture and everything so inhospitable with some false flag black swan inside job 9/11 style, or however they end up doing it, triggering some of that. Interestingly enough, there's an article coming up around MI6 officer who turns around and says any moment now there's going to be like a black swan event around. But here we go, the open air 15-minute cities. This is how they want everything to be, us to be sort of like stuck in sort of like these ghettos, because that's what literally they are, open air prisons. Where you're literally controlled, where apparently you know, go upstairs to go to work, you go downstairs to do the shopping, and your exercise is pretty much, you know, what happens in between. That's the style of living. This is the whole social credit score system. This is the whole reset. This is what they literally want to be doing as they, in my opinion, carve up, as per the Prophet Daniel, the world into 10 kingdoms with, you know, sort of like Trumpy boy doing that with Greenland, but we're going to cover back into that. But here you go. Been seeing these roll out with the smart cities, some of the articles that we've been covering as well, relating to the monstrosity of that. No doubt this will be the sort of like dangling carrot that will lure people onto trains so that they think that they're going to a nice 15-minute city, when actually, no, sorry, you're not. You're going to an education camp, you're going to a labor camp, a death camp, etc. This is sort of like what they have in mind. So interesting to see that development happening over here in the UK. Here we go. The Nazi Ursula von der Leyen declares war on free speech, calls it a virus, and censorship the vaccine. Literally calling free speech a virus. Why? Because this is what, you know, these individuals don't want. They don't want to have a discussion, so they want to control the narrative, so they want to control the flow of information. You spend £390 million on the media, which Bill Gates ended up doing, and you control every aspect of that. Then you get a whole generation of people, and more often than not, our friends and our family that aren't quite awake yet, that end up drinking from that particular trough, and that's their knowledge base, and that's all that they end up having, being programmable, being wired, being coerced, being groomed, being set up to the point where it gets to being so successfully achieved that those individuals that end up watching it go reinforcing the very values that have been dictated to them in the first place. This war on free speech is awful, isn't it? Absolutely awful, you know? Seeing it in so many different countries as they fall, as they give way to this beast system, the infiltration of global governments. Excuse me, Revelation 17:13, they're all of one mind and give their power to the beast. Look at how they all run around the Agenda 2030, the climate lie. Look how they run around the censorship. Every single sort of like, you know, like scripted response handed out from Davos, handed out from the Club of Rome, handed out from the, you know, sort of like Club of 300 and other sort of like committees and families, dictating to the masses in that sense. It's absolutely unbelievable that this speech is there. Crikey, got a Nazi, you know, unelected individual, bureaucrat in an office controlling like, you know, 40 plus nations of the world. Awful individual. Moving on. German government to jail citizens who post misinformation on X. And this is it. Who turns around and says what is information and disinformation? We were slapped so severely with, you know, strikes, etc., because we spoke about the adverse reactions to the vaccines. And look, lo and behold, what comes out from the CDC and the FDA and all these other sort of like truth tellers and all these other sort of like scientific studies that now get done after the fact, acknowledging and reinforcing what was it once said that was actually happening. And they called all that misinformation, disinformation, breaking the guidelines, breaking the rules. Beast system didn't want to be exposed, doesn't want the lights, doesn't want the truth, doesn't want the way shone upon it at all. Wants to operate seedily in darkness and in shadows. Wants to silence our ability to sort of like speak up and speak out and protest. At the same time, all meet in secret in their sort of like corridors of power and seemingly, you know, go about trying to decide our fate. All sort of like infiltrated by the World Economic Forum, young global leaders and young global shapers, as well as they've infiltrated all of these particular governments. You know, surely there should be some sort of like security alert that just gets activated and triggered with a conflict of interests when they serve the agenda of Davos or the beast system and not the citizens that they were elected to sort of like serve. Taking that power away from the voters, taking the power away from the ordinary people, making people feel afraid that, oh no, if I say something, the door's going to get booted down, or I'm just going to get arrested, or I'm going to get fined, or I'm going to get imprisoned. Well, that's what I think is going to be happening over here in the UK very shortly. Going to be booting down doors more. going to be ramping all of this, and these nations that end up meeting and having this to jail citizens. You're taking away someone's freedom for posting misinformation on X. See how desperate they are to control the narrative, control what people think, and are able to say as well. That's not exactly what the Bible turns around to us and says. What was Peter and the apostles sort of like response when they were dragged into the Sanhedrin and they were beaten and they were whipped and they were scourged, they were publicly humiliated and dragged around, you know what I mean? And all of these sort of like ridiculous trials and, you know, hearings that they had to go through, and just got, you know, took it real sort of like harsh on the sort of like persecution level. They didn't stop and say, oh yeah, fine, we're going to obey what you say, and that's all good, we'll submit, we'll yield. No, they were turning around and said, no, it's for us to be honouring God than you. Who is it better for us to honour? And it's not really a sort of like a question, is it, that we need to be asking? Here, another news, look, former CDC director wants mRNA COVID jabs pulled from the market. This isn't sort of like, you know, the rest of us, this is what we've all been saying, but when you get someone like that, then you get sort of like, you know, others from Pfizer as well that speak out, their ex sort of like, you know, the Pfizer execs, you know, all these guys speak out against it. Quite telling, isn't it? They want it pulled from the market. Why? And then over here in the UK, you get, you know, sort of like pharmaceutical companies as well, you know, being built, hundreds of millions of pounds, deals being made, Bill Gates as well, getting back into the schools, all of the vaccines that are being pushed at the moment with the flu jabs and everything else. And here we go, we've got this, you know, sort of like deadly vaccine that's still being pushed in and around, you know, places. And individuals saying, no, it needs to be pulled, it needs to be retracted, it needs to be rescinded. Here, Bill Gates and Albert Bourla facing life in prison in Dutch crimes against humanity lawsuit. People crying out for this sort of like Nuremberg 2.0 sort of a trial. But really, come on. Even the Nuremberg trial was pretty much a joke as well. Any prison sentences, you know, 90% of them weren't served, so, you know, none of them served their term. Unbelievable, isn't it? It's just all a token gesture. It's a sort of like dangling carrot. You know, it's this them literally like writing this script saying, I'll pretend that I'm against you and we'll get you, and all of this sort of stuff, when they're all in on it together, as the Bible says, all of one mind, all of one purpose. If these guys really wanted to put that out and these guys were to be arrested, they'd be arrested. So interesting, isn't it, who they can and can't grab conveniently. Here, coming out with it again, guys. Look, leaked 2026 CIA files expose Erica Kirk in satanic child trafficking cult. Okay, there's videos that we've got on our Rumble channel relating to this as well, with the rings that she's done with the hand gestures. We were speaking about it a little bit earlier, as well as evidence and photographs of her also standing behind sniper weapons, and even some of the staff there taking sort of like massive selfies in and around where, you know, Charlie was shot. So many things connecting her to Mossad and the paedophile sort of like child sex trafficking cult as well, adrenochrome, everything all mixed in. This is it. These are the celebrities that everyone sort of like, you know, oohs and ahs over, and they fall over, don't they? They end up believing all of this controlled opposition, this sort of like, you know, handler relationships and marriages that seem to happen as well. Some get offended by some of that, but if you were to dig a little bit deeper, you know, there's a lot more going on in and around this story. Also, it's also a case of the WEF saying, well, now we're getting into the enforcement phase. Anyone who speaks out and about against the WEF, that means instant death. And here we go. We've got assassinations. We've got that on the horizon, no doubt, as well. We saw Japanese Prime Minister being assassinated for returning loads of vaccines. We've also seen other European leaders have attempted assassinations. Also, elections being taken away and null and voided because they didn't seem to go the beast systems particular way. Big chats, huge chats. Also going to be having a little look at around the deep state and who really does, you know, run the UK. Some interesting stuff here. Look, declassified CIA MK Ultra files expose mass drugging with chemtrails and vaccines to control entire populations. We've been speaking about MK Ultra, have we not? Been speaking in and around Aerovax and vaccine against consent, aerosolizing that over our heads and using that. So many reporting sort of like FOGVID and this smog and this mist and a few other things as well, using all of that, no doubt, maybe perhaps with nanoparticles and other things. But yeah, with the drugging of individuals with the chemtrails, behavioral modifications, and various other drugs that are being used to sterilized, to control, etc. And there, the evidence is in it. Literally, bugs to be sprayed. Are we not here? Putin releases evidence. Bill Gates is pumping human remains into US food supply. We only have to go back to McDonald's, do we not, where evidence was found relating to children remains being found in sort of like McDonald's. Bill Gates also being with all of his GMO and all of his, awfulness, sort of like supplying sort of McDonald's with all of its sort of like fries, chips, whatever word you want to use for that. And this is part of it, isn't it? Also the mockery, the scoffing, the rituals that take place relating to that, as well as them getting rid of evidence and the like. And there's no better way to do that, is it? By human remains, turning us into mere cannibals and expecting us to eat, bugs, etc., modified and false foods, etc. Here, the evidence is in and around as well, is it? And they're not being forthcoming with ingredients. They're not being forthcoming with the content, with the labeling of what really is what is bioengineered, what is that particular code. As always, they don't want to have that conversation. As always, there isn't always that sort of like data safety, sort of like test being approved. More often than not, they end up failing it, and yet still being ushered in. Some nations being wise enough to ban some of this lab-grown meat. But when you're mass producing salmon or cattle or whatever, then it's really easy to sort of like make sure that you are vaccinating with mRNA, or you are putting other cancerous components in relating to what we'll look at shortly with some of this fast food that is actually causing super cancers. So evidence, Bill Gates is pumping human remains into US food supply as well, all part of their sort of like satanic rituals. We were speaking before, weren't we, guys, about London ex-MI6 spy warns of a new 9/11 style attack in the UK very soon. This particular article was relating to some of the sleeper cells that are basically over here, hundreds of them in the UK, many of them coming back from Afghanistan and other sort of like countries or war-torn areas that are sort of like battle hardened. It's very difficult as well to know who's also coming in through dinghies, etc., as the floodgates are opened in that regard. All those guys are, fighting aged men, of course they are. So interesting, saying that there's going to be some 9/11 style attack in the UK. We were covering before, were we not, around London, also turning off all of its sort of like webcams and the like, and saying, look, all it took was 3 or 4 nukes dropped in and around a few strategic places in the world. There you go, there's the forced vaccination because of the radiation, here's the quarantine in, here's the herd in, here's the sort of like reset to everything that we now need to sort of like reset the banking, to get rid of cash and autonomy and go for the CBDC option. And poof, sorry, you're gonna have to know who you are now with a digital ID. Hey, also gonna need to know, because we're also confined and living more closely together now, your vaccine status and the like. And somehow we're just gonna have to moderate and police this thing with a social credit score system, and see how quickly we are to that sort of way of life, and how inside jobs, false flags, 9/11s have been renowned to really sort of like shift and change everything. We have to think of the 9/11s, we have to think of the 7/7s, we have to think of other events that have literally merited these sort of like huge tyrannies that have followed thereafter. And so look, you've got a spy turning around and saying that there's 100 sleeper, sort of like terrorist organizations around, the same for America as well, all dotted in, and around the West. Interesting article also here coming out, and I'll check in with you guys in a moment. Patent for Apple's new earbuds. Guys, if you're wearing these things, be careful, radiation, be careful of the sort of like brain cancer. But also here, look, new earbuds will allow them to read your brain waves without consent. This is what the brain computer interface is all about. You get, you know, sort of like Bill Gates's Syncon and Jeff Bezos' Syncon injectable sort of like brain sort of like chip. Then that goes into the bloodstream, that can go off robotic or nanoparticles or whatever it is, and go and isolate it, you know, spaced into your brain. That's why the nasal swabs are so successful, to get there quicker, just to be able to be placed on the brain to work out what you're thinking, what you're feeling, all these emotions, and then having that direct interface with your devices as well, which Neuralink is now confiding that it enables their guys to be able to do, just to be able to do all of that with their mind, like some Jedi mind trick, you know, play first game shooters, order, you know, do various other things, emails, etc. So we're seeing this technology, and for me it will be, you know, the mark of the beast will be surrounded by all this degree of technology, all of these powers that they seem to be able to be given, just like Harari's been saying. We've created, we've now got these godlike powers, etc. You know, and what that is going to entail as part of the enticing of individuals to take this mark of the beast, as part of the deception as well. No doubt changing DNA will be a part of that also. So just really interesting. New earbuds will allow them to read your brainwaves without consent. Remembering also the WEF as well as having, you know, headphones and various other things in that office setting around being able to, you know what it is that you're thinking, you know. So it's two-way traffic, is it not? It's not just a case of, well, it's great, I can sit here because maybe I'm less abled or I've got, you know, some difficulty in writing or reading or whatever, and I can make a text with my head in that way and just do it with thinking about it. That's two-way traffic as well. How easy that is open to coercion, how that sort of like really does follow the transhumanist train, and the you know, changing of your DNA, not being anymore made into the image of God, but being made now into the image of the beast. And there'll be things like this that will really snare people as well, a young generation that will be enticed by all of these particular things, just how sinister some of those things can also just really be. We really got to wear the helmet of salvation in that particular way. So before we get into that, just want to come in and check in with you guys. Sorry, format's a little bit different. Came back and it did all of these sort of like updates, which I didn't ask it to do, and I had it all switched off, but it did it anyway. Bless you. Hi, Sherry. Hi, Yeshua for life. Bless you. Yeah, it was really good being with family and friends. Really good to sort of like be with those guys. I needed a bit of a break, if I'm being really honest. I felt like my brain was just becoming really elasticated. We had like a 4 or 5 month block of just like 6 days a week, boof, 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 just pounding it out, and we just didn't really get that sort of like time to recharge, and a day off doesn't sometimes like cut it when you're at it so much. And so yeah, I needed that time just to rest up as well, and spend some time doing all of that. So yeah, bless you. Deleted. Hi, Kevin. Bless you, buddy. Hi. I'm here again. Bless you. Good to see you guys. Hi, Laurie. Thank you for putting our Rumble video on. There's a video on there, guys. It's going to supplement what we're going to be talking about later, relating to Greenland. I really encourage you to watch it. It's the 51st state. Isn't just a land grab, it's prophetic. Looking at the Club of Rome, and that we're going to be looking at that in a little bit more as we go through, guys. But just starting off easy peasy. Bless you. Good to see you guys. Thanks for being. Hi, Spiritual Logic for Truth. Please do go subscribe to our dear brother, doing some absolutely phenomenal work as well. Your work ethic is off the scale good. Also, your content's really amazing. God bless you and your ministry, and you and yours. Really do go over and show some love to our brother over there. Some amazing views as well, bro. So well done. Bless you. Really great to have you guys here. Showing some love. Deleted. Okay, we'll leave it there. Frank. Hi, Monkey. Hi, Michelle. Right, here we go. Let's go back to the articles. Look, official study finds ultra-processed food cause lung cancer. We were speaking about this earlier, were we not, guys? In and around, you know, these sort of like products, this sort of like depopulation agenda, isn't it? A case of just like, you know, fattening us up. You go to these big supermarkets and no longer do you have aisles of, chicken and aisles of pork and aisles of beef, blah 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 blah. Now there's just like one aisle, and then they're all given a little short little bit. It's just like taking away that food source. There's no doubt, the sort of like, assault on agriculture and the banning of farming and taking away our food supply and everything else as part of this net zero agenda 2030 cult. Really interesting as well, just how these foods are producing some of those cancers. Also, what's in some of these products as well. We need to be asking ourselves, I think, some of these questions, praying over some of that. It's a great way to get rid of evidence, as we've been saying, around human remains, but other toxins and other things that are also really deadly and really sort of like carcinogenic to us and our system as well, sort of like messing with genes and the messing with, sort of like, how it's all being grown. Just want to put that out there as a sort of like, caveat for us. Here we go. This is when an entire country gets easily taken down when you have a queen, the Dutch queen, orders digital ID requirement for banking, school enrollment, and, wait for it, vaccine verification. This is the one that's spoken in the past. The Queen has spoken in the past at Davos, in and around digital IDs, how important it will be, and she's always connected that to the vaccine verification and vaccine status. And here you go, the Queen ordering digital IDs required for banking. And it's so interesting just how these actual apps that they've got pertaining to digital ID are so easily hackable, so easily sort of like taken, and your data, everything of that sort. Here you go, a whole queen, a whole nation proposing this sort of tyranny. In other news, major study links flu shots to a 440% surge in pneumonia and other respiratory illnesses. This is what they've been pumping around everywhere, isn't it? Been trying to sell that over here in the UK with pubs going into schools, so even going as far as saying, fine, we'll come to you and we'll come to your house, or if not, we'll set it up in your village in every single area and around, and then we'll hassle you and bully you with messages and texts and all manners of sort of like, highly emotive sort of like videos and clips and, adverts to be really persuasive and deviant to get this all. And then lo and behold, here you go, pneumonia, thanks for that, and other respiratory illnesses. Good grief. Here, coming back to Apple again, we were saying about these earbuds, Apple's darkest project yet, as they collaborate with the WEF to read your brain and control behavior. You just look now what happens with, sort of like having, BlackRock literally being a part of the entire scene now with the WEF and their sort of, the CEO, Larry Fink. And then just how these companies are now also collaborating with those particular agendas. Absolutely going to be monstrous to see this particular attack, but this is what's going to be happening, to read your brain and control behavior. Other news, guys, leaked Epstein footage shows King Charles presiding over satanic ritual involving minors. Other reports that we've made in and around hunting and the other rituals as well. Here, footage that's all coming out through the Epstein footage shows him. Also in other news as well, going to be looking at Keir Starmer that's also been there as these guys get groomed and then these guys get captured doing all of these seedy, perverted things, and then they're easily manipulated, coerced and blackmailed. And this is literally part of that, wasn't it? Part of what they did with the music industry, with P. Diddy, part of what they do with the satanic sort of like rituals with the movies and everything of that sort, the grooming of it. So many movies out there about people being hunted and children, seeing how the Olympics is also playing a huge part of that as well. This all comes down to the adrenochrome rings and the drinking of adrenalized blood, trying to give these guys in their cults, that sort of like longevity and, all of that sort of like Botox nonsense. But the sacrificing of children in this particular way has been going on for centuries, and it's still happening, guys. Here, we spoke about it in brief. Ireland to require all citizens to use digital ID to access social media. This is when it comes down to the compilation of lists. This is when it will come down to, more house arrests, more visits, more threats, more sort of like having others behind the scenes running interference at those individual when it comes to their utilities. I've come back and all of a sudden, oh, you've got no internet connection, and like all my phone's on, Wi-Fi's on, everything, TV doesn't want to work, laptop doesn't want to work, I have to do this via this particular means, everything's all laggy, everything's all slow, doesn't do what it needs to be doing. It's just a way of just frustrating and wearing down the saints in that particular way, but to require all citizens to use digital ID to access social media. When social media becomes so important that you have to surrender your data, your information, your freedom, your autonomy. The day, here you go, look, prime example, welcome, no name 2G1. You're welcome. Don't know who you are. You be male, you be female, what, I don't know. All right, you've got a right and a privilege to say, no name, I'm not having it, I ain't giving you nothing. I'm not even going to give you nothing in my thumbnail at all, blood. I'm going to tell you nothing about me because I've got a right to be autonomous. I've got a right to my privacy and not my data, where I live, my age, my information, to go and correlate that with another system database when it comes to all of my, medical records. So you can compile lists. So when you put this sort of like false flag, black swan, inside job 9/11 style upon us, then you'd be easily be able to sort of like, hoard us all up, just like they did back in Germany. First of all, gave them IDs, and there you go, there's your identification. And then sort of like, hoarded all of those guys up as well, did they not? Took away their rights, their freedoms to be able to sell, etc. Also threw in the whole euthanasia and the medical assistance in dying and death being offered to political dissenters, sterilising individuals, just like they're doing over in Africa with Bill Gates and the Melinda Gates Foundation and Singapore and other nations like India, where we're seeing all of this literally go on, being told, were we not in advance quite a long time ago, guys, the threats that were coming out from Ursula von der Leyen and Bill Gates saying, look, failure to have one of Bill Gates's digital IDs will, what they're now, exclude you from society. Wow. Has social media become so large, so big and grand and bold that now is like an integral part of our society? Do we not have a life outside of that? Do we not have a life before all of that? Or is that just all that encompasses us as individuals? Are you personally prepared to surrender your information to have access to some of these things? I'm personally not. And if that's the request, then no, that's fine, I won't use that. Other places will say, oh, continue with biometrics. Like, no, you're not having it. Over here on YouTube, if you want to pin a comment or you want to put in a link, well, hey, surrender to a 6-minute video, surrender to your information and digital ID checks. It's absolutely hysterical what's going on. As if that's kept us in any way safer when you've got an open door policy. Here, come in. Change the fabric of the society. Set up your rules and your laws and everything else. We'll protect you. And we'll attack the very nature and belief system of that nation. Convert it to be more tolerant, more coexistent. Here, digital ID. I'm surprised. We've been seeing this with the young people as well. We've been seeing it in sort of other Nordic countries that are taking this on board as well, saying, no, you're not having it unless you surrender this. Awful. Other news, doctors raise alarm over a surge in violent immune system collapse following new COVID vaccines. All of these things that they just don't like doing, like, the safety sort of like tests and the protocols, longitudinal studies, holding your work up to be critiqued and evaluated as what is science. Heaven forbid we're ever able to ask questions about some of these things. But it all comes out afterwards, does it not? Violent immune systems collapsing. We're also seeing, sort of like people's, immune systems collapsing. We're also seeing people being sterilized by these vaccines. We're also seeing people being, injured, sudden adult deaths, supercharged cancers, etc. No one wants to talk about some of those things and the after effects of having that, of having long COVID, the psychological impacts to all of this, and yet they still roll it out. In other news here, look, leaked Epstein footage reveals Bill Gates claimed thousands of babies in underground labs. And then you get sort of like, Sam Altman, who wants to do all this gene editing sort of stuff. And he's also bang tidy with Peter Thiel, who's got all of this sort of, adrenochrome, drinking blood and immortality freak off going on. Seeing, look, thousands of babies in underground labs as well, creating it for themselves. How many vampire movies have we seen where they've sort of like had to sort of like water down their supply because they can't get enough, or start drinking and eating rats or whatever? The alternatives, because they can't get rid of the evidence fast enough. But cloning those babies for those particular purposes, no doubt for rituals as well, the barbarism behind that, the playing of God, if you will. These places, these islands that no one has, and wow, all of a sudden you can't have satellite imagery over those particular places as they buy up these lands and pay off all of these rights. Seeing what this was really all about now, aren't we, when we're seeing graveyards being discovered after the facts. This is just UK has to be, doesn't it, really? Come on then now. UK announces mandatory digital IDs, wait for it, for all newborns. Parents who refuse will be jailed or be taken away by the state. The children will be taken away by the state. That is literally the latest crazy that's coming out over here in the UK. UK announces mandatory digital IDs for all newborns. Parents who refuse will be jailed. Who was it? Klaus Schwab, I believe, and Bill Gates saying that, no, we'll be, sort of like, microchipping them from birth or whatever. This is what Bill Gates is also turning around and saying, but having those digital IDs for all newborns, and parents who refuse will be jailed. Take your freedom away because you're not being compliant. Tell that also to the Canadian truckers. Tell that also to the Vietnamese who had all of their bank accounts being systematically frozen because they were being non-compliant when it came to the digital IDs. Frozen, gone, cancelled, bye-bye, nil point. What happened to the Vietnamese? Unbelievable, isn't it, when you really do think about it? Being told again that you're going to be excluded from society. Well, that's a pretty savage way of making sure that someone's excluded from society when you jail them for being non-compliant. Is that where we're getting down to now? Having this digital ID. And the hilarious part of it all is that in order to have a digital ID, so say, for example, I was stupid enough to want to go and get one, how would I need, what would I need to prove my identity? Well, I'd need my passport and my driving license. Really? What point, what use is it? Turning the world into such a mistrusting place where it's this papers, please society. Parents who refuse will be jailed. Those that will be compliant. Same thing with vaccines as well, being taken away from parents, being prevented from seeing each other because of all of these things. How aggressive that literally is, but how also desperate they are to try and get this out from such a young age. Vaccinating them 72 times before they even turned 3. Now wanting to also start in the womb. Now wanting to sort of like barcode all of these particular children as well. No doubt under the pretense it will help with child trafficking or some nonsense that they've spewed out. But parents have a right to decide what's right and appropriate for their children. They've got the right to turn around and say, no, we don't want this for our child. We don't trust what you're doing with that information and that data. I'm sorry, I don't see why you're collating that. All I feel is that you use that against me and it's weaponized against me. Unbelievable. Here, Keir Starmer aide blows the whistle. Deep state controls the UK government. This is what Liz Truss was saying, British Prime Minister, before, how she was unable to perform her duties as Prime Minister because of the deep states. High civil servants in British government, also those that are, infiltrated in high positions of authority, deliberately positioned via blackmail, coercion, or the like. Positioned. That's really telling, isn't it? When you're not serving the British people's interests, but an outside sort of like party, deep state, Davos. That's what Keir Starmer was famous for saying, wasn't it? When he was asked, who do you prefer, Davos or Westminster? No hesitation. Davos is what he was saying. because there was too much legality, there was too much red tape, there's too much bureaucracy. So it's like, really, these guys don't make decisions with us. They didn't ask us whether or not we wanted to have a Palestinian state. 9 out of 10 Brits don't want that. They didn't ask us about the digital ID, didn't ask us about the censorship bills, didn't ask us about the fishing and the farming, didn't ask us about the pandemic treaty, didn't ask us about, you know, all of the things that we're seeing being made with farming and agriculture and following the Agenda 2030 goals. Haven't asked at all. It's all serving this particular evil agenda, controlling a whole entire government. That ought to set off every security alert, but it's not going to happen when you also control the security services. You also control police and law enforcement. This is when it gets really interesting, guys. This is what we've been saying since we've returned to YouTube. This is all about Greenland for Trump, and also end time Bible prophecy, guys. This is so really mind-blowingly important. What the prophet Daniel was able to see, that there will be 10 sort of like end time kings, as we read in Revelation 17. 10 end time kings. And here we have the Club of Rome. You know, these are the guys that also came up with the climate lie, depopulation. The climate lie was literally all around, you know, sort of like the revolution, they called it. That was their book. And then they had the depopulation, which was the limits to growth. But the Club of Rome was also really well renowned and is still functioning now. They've got websites, go and check them out. Okay, in and around dividing the world up into 10 kingdoms as well, as per the prophet Daniel. And here we see Trump eyeing up Canada. We've got Mark Carney. That boy's going to roll right over, okay, with some inside job there. That's done. That's handed over straight away. Okay, with Canada being the 51st state and also taking on Greenland. Sherry, if you're still here, sis, could you please put that video in the sort of like live relating to Canada isn't just a 51st state, it's Bible or prophetic, or that video, because there we've got some really good imagery where you've got Donald Trump talking around Denmark and wanting to capture that because of like Chinese and Russian interference in and around the waters and wanting to have that for security purposes, etc. We're going to be covering quite a bit more in and around Greenland, so I'm not going to ruin that. But really interesting how we're seeing that also take shape. And the mentioning of kings also, we might add. So it's got nothing to do with BRICS. This is about the Club of Rome, dividing that up, as we're seeing in the, you know, sort of like, you know, the Bible, Daniel's prophecy with the last 10 kings. Also, as we read in Revelation 17 as well, all being of one mind, as we've been saying. And look at how this is starting to take shape. Look also with the second kingdom to the Club of Rome, all right? And you'll see, we'll go into the Club of Rome's map a little bit later, but you'll see the UK and how we're really edging back into Brexit and back into the European stranglehold as well. Here, Denmark demands that Trump stops threatening Greenland. It's going to leave that just there for now because we're going to cover it back a little bit more. But here we go in other news. UFO researcher says the Pope is getting ready for first contact with aliens. Well, this isn't the first time a Pope's been prepared to sort of like have a little sit down and a little kumbaya of an alien. Also being prepared to baptize them as well, as was Pope Francis. So interesting as well is a big reveal. These are the guys that also have a telescope called Satan, no joke, as well as maybe some big reveal, some Project Bluebeam or some, I don't know, 3i Atlas. I don't know what's really going on with that, but really interesting as well. No doubt they'll play a part in that deception. Here, UCLA expert blows the whistle. CDC lied to parents and pushed dangerous COVID jabs on children. Lied to parents and pushed dangerous COVID jabs onto children, and they're still doing it now. And when, like we've been saying, when you cross that line, when it comes to trust, you can't get that back. Okay, you can't get it back. And this is what they're desperately trying to do, isn't it? Damage control. But the truth comes out. Here in other news, Canada euthanizes young and healthy man over a bout of depression. Seeing this with medical assistance in dying. We're seeing so many nations taking up this euthanasia bill and offering that out to young and healthy men and women over bouts of depression or anxiety, or a little bit of financial control, or some mental health issues, not necessarily always pertaining to, you know, pain or etc., wanting just to have end of life sort of like care or whatever. But here you go, just how that gets really blurry as well. What is also really interesting is that Hitler did this as well in 1939 to 1941. And the German people were so outraged that they just kicked off about it and it was brought to an end. The whole sort of like euthanasia bill and the sterilizing of dissenters and castration of men and women, etc. And here we've got the euthanasia as well as also being offered for those that were disabled or, deemed, surplus to requirements, but young and healthy over depression. This is what they're doing, isn't it? This is their health. This is their care system offering death. Britain to spend 270 million on preparing troops for a multinational force in Ukraine. Also other news saying that they're going to be increasing sort of like age to reservists being called up from 55, I think, to like 60 or something, or 65. I was like, come on, really? You're going to get Dad's army running over, do you know what I mean, some hill trying to take it. It's like, no. But here you go, 270 million pounds. This is also part of, is it not, the coalition of the willing, as they like to call it, this axis of evil, this Five Eye thing. All of a sudden now they're wanting to solidify all of that. Could there be some form of defeat that goes on relating to this and more of a formulation of the EU rising up more into power as the old Roman Empire that she was? No doubt that'll gather more momentum as well as Europe is perhaps defended. But come on, seriously, this has been going on for quite some time. There has been rumours that British troops are already on there, speaking about the long-range weapons and the consequences of using those, and yet lo and behold, off they get shipped, literally enticing us to a position of war is Starmer. And interestingly, I don't even think that Starmer would put up a fight. He'd be like, "Nah, help yourself, mate. For in the interest of safety, health and safety, I surrendered Britain to sort of like, Russia." You can imagine it. That's job done, isn't it? That's the icing on the cake. That's what the Fabian Marxist really wants. Good grief. In other news, UAE. This is really damning for the UK. UAE bans its citizens from studying at UK universities over fear of Islamic radicalization. You heard that right. The UAE, those guys that like to chop off heads and whatnot, bans its citizens from studying at the UK universities over fear of Islamic radicalization. Anyway, Israeli judge investigating Netanyahu's adrenochrome links found dead. So interesting, isn't it? All of these other guys that are sort of like prosecuting all of these high figures, apparently, some of them end up dead. And that's the only way that you can really tell who's authentic. Have they been killed off yet? Or are they controlled opposition? But an Israeli judge investigating Netanyahu's adrenochrome links found dead. This is the sort of like paedophile capital of the world, as so many are literally going over there in their droves. And the connections to these sort of like, from Mossad, etc., adrenochrome links and chains and groups that are being exposed. There's so much information out there, guys. Moving on, leaked FBI footage shows British Prime Minister Keir Starmer in sick initiation ritual. And you might think, well, I'm not so sure he's going to do this initiation ritual. Tell that to where he was photographed bowing down with his fingers, pointing out, his submission to his overlords. This initiation is also part of that. This initiation was also his submission when he went to Davos the year before, 6 months before he got into office, and was saying, look, no, well, if I'm elected, Britain will play a much more important part into proceedings, whatever. He's given the job, and look what the boy's done. Serving the interests of Davos, serving his own self-interest, his own personal gain. Wanting literally to sort of like eradicate the very nature of our sovereignty and our identity with an open door policy. This Orwellian style tyranny, turning us into a penal island, a penal colony almost. An embarrassment to the rest of the world, where we once shone a light when it came to freedoms and laws and the right way to do things. standing up against evil, speaking out against it. Now, no, these guys want to bow down to that. They want to submit to that. They want to have a big show and tell when it comes to their music and their movies and their hand gestures and every which way they can, paying homage to the beast, who wants nothing more than to be worshipped. But these are initiations as well that we've been seeing being going on in others more severe, where children have been sacrificed, etc., to test loyalty, to test dependence. After you've been groomed, you're going to be tested and tried. Here, in other news, British government says Elon Musk's X could be banned in the UK. Seeing this as a deliberate setup, isn't it? Musk mouths off, Starmer gets the ump, all of a sudden we lose our service. It's just literally sort of like that, is it not? It's really important as a content creator here, when I'm making videos, that I have access to this. This is one of the last places to have that. So important before they start eradicating, erasing, telling you can't access that, telling you you're forbidden, or it's restricted, or it's for your own good. Turning around and banning something where people can share. Who cares what people are sharing? People could be sharing on X that there's unicorns that can fly, and when they fart, they create rainbows. And if everybody in the whole world believed in that, who cares? Why do you have to control? So, do you see what I mean? It's like, why do they have to be involved in what people think and what people say to that particular degree that they have to ban a whole entire platform? This is what Ofcom's also doing, fining X as well. Millions and millions of pounds for the trouble. It's ridiculous. It's all just so scripted. Here, again, still with the UK. UK government. This is when it gets terrorizing for each of us, guys. UK government warns teens questioning mass immigration will flag you as a domestic terrorist. I'm going to read that out again. UK government warns teens questioning mass immigration will flag you as a domestic terrorist. It's so easy. When you label someone a terrorist, then there you go, Magna Carta, your rights gone, all of your legal representation gone. They can hold you indefinitely under the Terrorism Act 2000, throw away the key and stick you in some black site, Guantanamo Bay style, and that's it. You are done. When they start to be able to successfully label dissenters as terrorists, that's what will follow. Questioning immigration. Should you not be questioning immigration? Should you not be concerned about the safety of your country? Are we not told to be responsible citizens in some way? Not to be concerned with our waters, who's coming in, who's doing what to children, what value systems that is being set up, what rights are being given to these individuals, what resources are being given to these individuals? As others have been starving over the winter periods, being so cold, heating or eating, it was one or the other, it wasn't both, as they give billions away to the climate lie or to the Ukraine or these other places, and they don't take care of their own populace, their own people, want to label them as domestic terrorists for speaking out against what? Mass immigration? That's a serious problem that we have here, guys. Unbelievable. And this is what will be happening. They'll be labeling you and I as terrorists in some way, online terrorists or something of that sort. And once we've got that, we're done for. That's where it's heading, guys. I'm telling you. Here, German government to hack US devices and compile lists of dissidents who pose threat to New World Order. German government to hack US devices and compile lists of dissenters. This is where all of this digital ID and all this data is going, guys. Compiling of lists of dissenters, those who oppose or pose a threat to the New World Order, those that speak out. So what, they can then send Palantir, like we've been saying, around and just ruin your life behind the scenes. Here, that was Germany. Lo and behold, what we were saying about the axis of evil, UK government to read all private messages under Orwellian new surveillance plan. Really interesting, isn't it? How we're meant to have this privacy, we're meant to have all of these encryptions and all these VPNs, and we're meant to have this. I can't understand why all of these phone companies and other places aren't crying out you know, hell for this matter, saying, no, why are you, government, trying to do all of this with our messages, with our services? We're offering our customers this privacy, and you're going to be able to read all of those and access all of that? Use that for what? Your own personal perverted spank bank? Sorry, that just dropped out. But you know what I mean? Unbelievable. Overreach. Russia offers, here we go back to Greenland. Russia offers to help seize Greenland. Denmark also putting in a shout like it's its land as well. Come back to that again. But interesting how we were speaking out about how this is going to start taking shape. The first kingdom will start taking shape. Then it'll be on to the second, and off it goes. Here, Trump envoy claims Denmark is occupying Greenland. Here, British people rise up against Bill Gates' digital ID scheme. Starmer's digital case is in ruins. Well, apparently, digital ID is the mandatory part is to be dropped. But I'm not buying into that sort of like you know, small apparent victory, when all it will take is a, sort of like national emergency or something of that sort, just to put that back into a different sort of category. But here you go, people rising up. Didn't listen to the millions that spoke out against digital ID, or the hundreds of thousands that took to the streets, or all of the other sort of like, counties around the country that literally wrote and says, no, we're not going to be compliant. Here you go, back to Greenland. Bill Gates and other tech billionaires invest in Greenland for mining operations. How interesting. Come back to that in a moment. Putin plans to save civilization by erasing the UK and Germany with nuclear strikes, says a Kremlin strategist. Thanks for that. This is just awful. It's absolutely awful. British government bans journalists from entering UK after she criticised Keir Starmer online. She basically turned around and mentioned the rape gangs and his lack of leadership and etc. And she basically was given a response which basically says, sorry, we're rescinding your ETA visa, and you're not welcome, and it's not in the British people's interest that you are here. And she's systematically banned from coming to the UK. A journalist, the UK being banned. Good grief. How afraid and insecure they are, huh? Here we go. Gets worse. Canadian government to begin euthanizing Christian patients without consent. Desperately trying to get into these religious hospitals. Trying to get those in and amongst that as well without their consent. Organ harvesting that we've been speaking of and now about against as well, guys. Without consent. The coercion, the manipulation. And if you think we're sort of like taking a little bit of a leap when it comes to Greenland, and it's all just a conspiracy theory, check out this bad boy. European nations dispatched a combined force of 33 troops to Greenland to deter Trump. 33. And there was 13 from Germany, by the way, just saying. 33. I'll leave that with you. Canadian Prime Minister declares China must lead the New World Order. Crikey, isn't that something out of Klaus Schwab when it comes to him saying, hey, we need to adopt this particular model. China is really, really, really good. This is also what he says in his book as well, COVID-19 and the Great Reset, relating to 4 billion useless eaters that need to be killed away, and that, half a billion of the people out of the 1 billion that are spared should be Chinese because they're compliant and they're more pliable as such. But here you go, China must lead the New World Order. Guys have been saying it. People hate me for it. I don't care. But, until the world starts to look a little bit more like China and these countries really do go down and under, we're not that close to going home just yet. But here you go, must lead the New World Order. This is the template, is it not, that they're all initiating? So then this has come back to the Club of Rome, can we? Looking at the First Kingdom, this is really important. important that we look at this. The first kingdom to the Club of Rome is the North American Union. That includes, guys, the US, that includes obviously Canada and Greenland. Interestingly, Mexico and Venezuela and other countries as well all form part of the South American Union as well. So interestingly, getting borders all sorted out with what's going on down there with Venezuela, various changes in governments, elections, shuffling of the deck, as you will, getting all in order, all in place, all calling themselves the kings. No doubt all of these infiltrated governmental leaders have been promised somewhat of a slice of the pie when it comes to the dividing up of the spoils. But we read, do we not, of what really happens to these kingdoms in Revelation 17. And so there you have it, guys. The first kingdom is the North American Union. That is Canada, that is the US, that is the Greenland. You just wait until that takes more shape. Second, this will be us in the UK, the European Union, and obviously Britain rejoining. Watch out for that happening. There, Japan, the European Union, number 3, probably one of the smallest of the kingdoms. Number 4, the Pacific Union. This includes all of our Australian brothers, New Zealand and South Africa. So you can take that out of BRICS, that's gone. Number 5, the Asian Cooperation Dialogue. That's all of Russia and China, those guys piling up. Then you've got number 6, which is the South American Union. You've got South America, Brazil, and Mexico, all of that part of the world. Number 7, this also includes Israel, the Arab Customs Union. That's all of North Africa and the Middle East. Number 8, so you've got the remaining bits of the African Union outside of the North being given and the South being given away to the other union, the Pacific Union. And then we've got number 9, which is the Southeast Asian nations, Singapore and Malaysia and all of those islands over there. And then the number 10, you got the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. You got India, you got bits of Burma, Nepal, etc. That's how they're carving up the spoils, guys. I will be putting these particular posts in every single one of these headlines will be in 5 posts after this live, guys. So I'll put that there with you. We've been speaking about that, hoping that you've been able to put that video up, Sherry, relating to the land grab that is going to be the 51st state. See what's going on next with Canada. That's the one that's really going to need to topple and be given up under some pretense, I suppose. Speaking about articles relating to certain fuels and things being sprayed over forests, could we be seeing arson attacks, an inside job, scuttling of the boat, etc., etc. Interesting also still with Denmark, tariffs now being put on. You're going to see a lot going on with Denmark and the like. Trump has been saying he will be getting Greenland one way or the other, and no doubt as he has this expansionist mentality. When we read, here we go, guys, the holy word of God, Revelation 17:12, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as of yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength under the beast. Look at how that beast, how that sort of like being of one mind and giving their power and strength unto the beast is happening now to the beast system. How we're seeing that really take shape as well. Also some really interesting article coming out from the truth paper, The Light. This is our last one, guys. Just looking at connecting the dots when it comes to mass immigration, climate crises, public-private partnerships, Internet of everything, Internet of body, Internet of things, brain-computer interfaces, 5G, 6G, digital currency, AI automation, digital ID, and the economic decline there that we have as well, guys. Some really interesting sort of like articles for us to be sort of like looking at, guys. Thank you for your sort of like patience with that as we went through 50. That's really good for us to be having a really good catch up. Yes, Laurie, the 10 kingdoms as per the prophecy in Daniel, as well as the Club of Rome. Okay, this is what's taking shape, guys. Club of Rome, they come up with the climate Emmett Lai. They come up with The Limits to Growth with their book, and they also come up with The Revolution when it came to depopulation. Ursula von der Leyen and Klaus Schwab also bigging up the Club of Rome, and Klaus Schwab taking the credit for giving the Club of Rome a platform, and Ursula von der Leyen praising the depopulation agenda that they also came up with as well. And so, boy, are we not seeing these guys really take a real sort of like, key lead in developments, especially when we're seeing these nations starting to just like, just look a little bit, like that. So we give the Lord God, the credit and the glory and the praise and all that he deserves in our worship for showing us, in a sense, all that he has with knowing what the Holy Word of God says will be happening at the end times when it comes to the formations of these kingdoms, when it comes to these tyrannies, when Jesus says, when you see these things start to take place, look up because your redemption draws near. And we're seeing that beast system rising. We're seeing things getting ready for his sort of like appearing, and the first seal being done. We'll be out of here before then. But before then, guys, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more tyrannies, a lot more false flag inside jobs, a lot more sort of like censorship, a lot more bills. I think also fair to say a lot more sort of like wars and rumors of wars are going to be circulating as well. And then, whenever it is that they've planned this event to sort of like reset the whole thing, that's going to be it. Because in my opinion, guys, they've only got 4 years to sort of like, tuck this 2030 agenda goal to bed with their 17 sustainable development goals as well. So they're in a hurry as well. And for me personally, sort of like 2,000 years after Jesus's sort of like death is, kind of like 2033, 2032 between there. So looking to see what's going to be happening over that particular period of time, but also being expectant that the Lord could come whenever he chooses. Wanted to share some gospel messages with you here before we go. 1 Corinthians 15, 1-4. Now I would remind you, brothers, of the gospel I preached to you, which you received, in which you stand, and by which you are being saved, if you hold fast to the word I preached to you, unless you believed in vain. For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the scriptures, that he was buried, and he was raised on the third day in accordance with the scriptures. Amen. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. Here, Romans 10:9, because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For with the heart one believes and is justified, and with the mouth one confesses and is saved. For the scripture says, everyone who believes in him will not be put to shame. For there is no distinction between Jew and Greek, for the same Lord is Lord of all, bestowing his riches on all who call on him. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Praying that you're walking in relationship with the Lord Jesus as well. Please do help yourself, guys, to all of our videos on our sort of like Rumble channel. Also, we're on Telegram as well, just to be responsive to our Australian brothers and sisters down there who are having to surrender digital IDs. So there will be sort of like those posts over on our Telegram channel as well, where there's 13,000 plus end time articles, over 900 videos, over 900 posts, and we're adding to that sort of like daily now. We will be. So guys, we will be back kind of like our 6-day working week, back again tomorrow. After this live, I'll post all of those 50 end time headlines, and you can sort of like do a little bit of thumb exercises and the like, and get yourself all brought up to speed as to what's been happening. And then as of tomorrow, we'll get back with something specific or particular that the Lord might want us to be having a look at and exposing and having a discussion at. So apologies for the sort of like font to a little bit of all of this. I might have to sort that out with being all logged off and being away for so long. But bless you. Thank you so much to our mods just for keeping this a safe space, and for the team as well, for you guys, for your prayers, your support. And like I said, we'll be back again tomorrow, and look out there now for those sort of like 50 posts that you can get your laughing gear in and around, and bring yourself also up to date. So bless you guys, and we'll talk again soon. All right then now.